Hello and good evening. Hello, hello, hello. It is so very good to see you here. Thank you for joining me this evening or from wherever you're joining me from. Please let me know where you're at, what line of work that you're in. I see some people burning up the comment section already. I love seeing that. So thank you for already being bringing your A game. Hello, Chosi. Hello, Yang. Hello. You're saying hello again, Chosi. You're an overachiever. And Vanity, hello. Very good. Okay, so Vanity says hello, good evening from North Carolina. An NEMT. I feel like I should know what that is, but I'm not sure where that is. Maybe you can help me out with that, Vanity. And then hello from Maine. Oh, Maine. Very good. Okay. I have a little Etsy shop that I'd like to grow and currently work in transportation. Very good. Excellent. Josie, I cannot see that little. Man, I am trying to. Let me see if I can make my fonts bigger. I think that I can do that. Yeah, a little bit. All right, that's a little bit bigger. All right, so it's a laughing thing. Oh, non-emergency medical. Oh, very good. Non-emergency medical transportation. Very good. All right. Well, welcome to all of you, and thank you for being on time. We have a lot to cover tonight, this evening for strategic planning for business owners. I know many of you try to engage in strategic planning, and unfortunately it's difficult because many of you are operationally focused. I understand that. I work with a lot of business owners who really have no concept of strategy except just whacking the closest alligator to the boat. And I get it. Like, it's not easy. I have been that business owner that has struggled a lot more. I got it wrong more than I got it right. So I just want to let you know that you can still get it wrong quite a bit and still do pretty well for yourself. And I'm in my mid 50s now, closing. I'm 53, and I have been in business most of my life. And in some way, shape, or form, most of my family has been in some entrepreneurial endeavors, some full-time, some part-time, some are just side hustles. But I just want to let you know that this is something that I have. What we're going to be talking about tonight is probably one of the more difficult things to do, because strategic planning takes time away from working in the business, right? It takes time from your families. It takes time away from just stuff that you just enjoy doing. But it's so incredibly necessary. It's like walking on the football field without designing a play in advance, right? You just go like, hey, let's just go play football, right? And if you're playing for fun, that's no problem. But if you're playing to win, that's definitely a problem. And when it comes to business, you've got to play to win. You've got to play so you can bring money in to feed your family, to advance your goals. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that tonight in terms of personal vision, your personal goals, and things like that, because most strategic plans are all very business focused. So I just want to make sure we're going to be covering a lot of ground tonight in a lot of different areas. We're talking business systems and business psychology. They are inextricably linked. And if you think it's all about systems, or you think it's all about psychology, you're missing a critical component. So got a lot to cover tonight. DJ Riddick, I love that name. I have a clothing brand that I'm trying to grow. Currently work for Water Services. DJ, I feel like I've seen your name before. Is this your first time here? I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining that, but I feel like I've read that before. Well, good. I'm glad that anybody who is coming back to join me again, welcome, and I'm glad that you could join me if this is your first time. So a couple of ground rules we've got I'm going to try to. This is going to be a little bit over an hour. This is really hard to do in an hour, usually just because I go down different tangents based on your questions. So it's not that I'm trying to keep you on here longer than necessary, but I want to make this relevant to you. So if you're watching this live, you get the benefit of asking me live questions. If you're watching this on replay, then maybe you can learn vicariously through someone else's questions. Nope, first time. Okay, very good. Well, I'm glad that you could join me. All right, so one quick thing I'm going to ask you to do. I know it's difficult. I know you're probably at home. Many of you are at home, or many of you are just trying to get through your day, or trying to maybe get dinner ready, trying to get kids to bed, that sort of thing. What I'm going to ask you to do is please do your very best. Try not to multitask, because you may be missing a really golden nugget that could really change your life. So I really want to encourage you, try not to multitask as much as you possibly can. The most effective people who are really able to move the needle in their lives and in their businesses are the ones who really know how to prioritize and really know how to focus. So what I'm going to be asking you to do is to train your brain for the next 54 minutes or so to train your brain to focus. And you can do it. I know it's the end of the day, but if you thought of yourself enough to sign up for this, and I had quite a few people sign up that are not here, and that's interesting. So what does it say about you guys who did show up, who are here? That says a lot for you. So I want you to make sure that you're getting the most out of your time here this evening. One quick thing, I do get a question on this all the time. There will be a replay and it will be emailed to you. So I just want to make sure that you knew that. And of course, the replay will also be on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's get to it. So we're talking about strategic planning for business owners. Let's get to the agenda. The agenda, first and foremost, we're going to be getting into the systems side of the business, like we talked about, and there is the psychology side of the business. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. And if someone could do me a favor, someone is inevitably going to show up in here in a few minutes and ask if there's a replay. If one of you wouldn't mind answering them, because sometimes I miss that. I would really appreciate the help. But we're talking about systems and we're talking about psychology. The other side of the equation is also the 4 core functions of business. So we're going to be talking about this Viper methodology that I have written about in the Time Wealthy Advantage, which was a book I just published in May of this year. But we're also going to be talking about the 4 core functions, and every business has to have these 4 core functions. The last part is going to be all about the strategic plan, but I'm not going to be waiting until the end to talk about strategic planning. It's going to be woven in through all of the training tonight. So it's not just only wait until the very end to talk about strategic planning. It's going to be woven in through all of it. So please just hang in there. If you've got certain things that you're trying to plan, I promise more than likely we're going to hit it tonight. And then the final part is some resources that will set you up for success beyond today. All right, so let's get to the strategic. This is about a strategic approach to planning. And this is interesting because when I know that sounds a little militant, but we're not going to get super granular on things because strategic means broad scope. So this is about basically taking all of your assets, everything that you have that's good, things that you have that aren't maybe so good, and you kind of put it all out on the table and you kind of sort through, put your assets over here, put your liabilities over here, and just start thinking about what this is and start creating a plan. And just because you may have a lot of things going against you right now doesn't mean you don't have a lot of things going for you either. And it may be things that you may not recognize. This is why it's also helpful to have maybe someone help you in your strategic planning, because sometimes it's just hard not to focus on all the negative things. So this is where you have to take a strategic approach, putting everything out on the table, on the war planning table, and start creating this battle plan. And understanding too is that part of planning also involves creating a timeline. So we're not going to create the timeline until the very end. We're going to be talking about the timeline, but creating a timeline is really, really important because it actually starts to make it tangible. Not just, oh, I want to, have a house on the beach someday. I want to write a book someday. I want to be a published author. I want to, I want to make $1 million have $1 million in my bank account or make $1 million a month. Okay, fine, but when, right? And this is a very, very powerful part of this, is putting a timeline to the planning. So when we take this business approach, as I mentioned also already, is there's a systems approach and there's a psychology approach. So there's systems and psychology. And this is all, we're going to start with systems first. Sorry, I don't know why that circled it. There it is. Okay, sorry. There was a weird lag on my screen here. So the systems part is what we're going to start on first. And that is what was written about in the Time Wealthy Advantage. Not here to promote the book. If you want it, you can get a copy of it through Amazon, but I'm not here to pitch that. Or you can get a copy if you're in the United States. You can get a copy a little bit cheaper, and I can sign it if you go to strategicboardroom.com. Anyway, so we're talking about the Viper framework. The Viper framework specifically is an acronym for vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. This is a top-down look at your business and how you're going to create your business. If you've been through any of this before, this is going to be a little bit of a review, but there's other components in the Viper framework that I've not mentioned before, and I only mention in the strategic planning because it ends up being too much. This framework is very robust. There's a lot in here, but it's not so robust that anybody can implement it, even if you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur with an idea, or you are a micro business owner with up to 20 employees. And if you have up to 20 employee business, you're running a pretty sophisticated operation. I can promise you it's complex, right? Just because of all the nuances. Imagine raising 20 children, right? Not that your employees are children, but I was saying there's a lots of different components because each one of those individuals has a different personality. And that's why it's so complex. So let's get into the vision piece first and foremost. Vision is really where you want to go, and it is specifically broken down into two main components. There's personal vision and there's business vision. Now, let's get into the personal vision first, because again, we all have these businesses that ideally will serve us in some way, right? I mean, having a business that generates a bunch of money so you can go live your best life is kind of the idea, right? That's the whole point. So the personal vision, interestingly enough, is what most entrepreneurs, most business owners have never given any sort of consideration to, because they've always been focused on the business, right? So the personal vision side is just basically going to ask you a simple question: where do you want to go? Josie, where do you want to go? Vanity, where do you want to go in life if it wasn't dictated by income generation? DJ, what would you want your life to look like from day to day, moment to moment, if it wasn't defined by income generation? That's a really important piece. We're going to go a little bit deeper on this section here than the strategic planning. Remember, this is strategic planning for business owners. It is not business strategic planning. That is different. This is for strategic planning for business owners, because you as business owners, no offense, and I say this with love in my heart, you kind of suck at planning for yourself, right? Like planning for vacations or planning, for just life events that you want for you. Now, if you're good at that, great. You're going to be ahead of the curve on this. But most people that I encounter they put their businesses first, second, and third, and they get to win somewhere like 10th down the line. So I'm just saying, like, this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time this evening as we get into the personal vision. The business vision is going to ask you, okay, cool, that's where you want to go. Now let's reverse engineer a plan on how we're going to get there. And that's what the business vision does. And we are going to get into that after we get through the personal vision. But here's the thing. The danger in creating a business vision without ever giving any consideration to a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And I'm just telling you, I've been down that road and it sucks. I spent more than a decade chasing this business vision thing. And I'm telling you, your business is never going to love you as much as you love it. And that why would you want that sort of endeavor? It just doesn't work that way. And I'm telling you, like, once you, and this is where I see a lot of business owners get this wrong, because they're confusing achievement for fulfillment. And I've sat in masterminds where these people are making net $100,000, $200,000, 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures a month. And they are so completely unfulfilled in their lives. And guess what their goal is? To make more money, somehow thinking that that's where they're going to find their fulfillment. So I'm not saying that you can't be fulfilled by making money, but I'm just saying that there's got to be more than that. So one of the things that I suggest is this concept of a 100th birthday speech. So you're turning 100 years old, happy birthday. And I want you to think about what you might say if you were creating a 100th birthday speech. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly because there's a lot of sections in here. I'm going to take myself down to the small part here. So that way you can just take a quick screenshot and start to answer these questions after the fact. But say it's your 100th birthday speech. Listen, what would you say? What would you want? Who would you want actually in the room? What message would you want others in the room to carry outside the room? So you're done speaking. What would be the message, the legacy that you would want for people to pass along? And finally, what would you want others to say to you afterwards? Like, wow, Grandpa, Grandma, that was such a great speech. I love that you said about this thing. What would you say? Now, for some of you, I get it. You might be saying, well, hang on just a second. All right, listen, I'm 25. Really, 100 years is so far removed from my consciousness, I can't even imagine. Or you're 45 or even 65. That might be too far for you. Okay, fine. If that's the case, then think about the next milestone. Think about the next true milestone for you. For us, it would be like we have a 20-year-old, we have a 17-year-old, and we have a 3-year-old. Okay, so I'm 53. For me, my real next milestone is probably my 60th birthday. That's probably it for me, right? So, my daughter will be turning 10. For me, that's not really as big a deal, but for me, probably turning 60 is probably more of a milestone. So that's 7 years from now. So if I'm thinking, okay, what would I want to say? in terms of that. Or maybe you have a child that's turning 18, is getting ready to go to college, or maybe, something along those lines, or maybe you're getting ready to retire in 7 or 8 years, something like that might indicate a milestone for you. All right. So use that milestone instead of if the 100th birthday speech is too far removed from your future self continuity. All right, let's look at the other things or you can ask yourself some foundational questions. Again, I'll remove myself from the screen here so you can just take a quick snapshot of that. But if everything in your life was going well for you, what would that look like? What would it look like if your faith was going well, or your family, your friends, your personal growth, your fun, your contribution, fitness, and finances? What if all that was going really, really well for you? What would that look like? And again, this is important. Again, all this is about planning, not just for your business, but planning specifically for you. All right, I promise we're going to get to the business stuff here in just a second. So hang in there with me. But this is what I'm talking about this is the sort of things that you need to start to ask yourself these questions and take a few minutes and really get clear. I mean, this is a great time of year to start this sort of goal planning and strategy seeking in this time of the year as you're heading into the next year. These last 4 questions, if your marriage or romantic relationship is ideal, what would that look like? Or if your family life was ideal, what would that look like? Right? If your health was perfect in every way, what would that look like? And finally, if your financial situation were ideal, what would that look like? So these are all the sorts of things. Oh, there's one more. Sorry about that. If your approach to faith was ideal, what would that look like? So these 7 questions, or these 5 questions, these are, again, other things that you can use to get deeper into your personal vision. Or just simply ask one very simple question is, what is it that you look forward to? What is something that you look forward to that you could put in your personal vision for 2026? And just name some of those things that may be around relationships or whatever else it is. Maybe it's camping, maybe it's going kayaking. I'm a gun guy, so I like to go shooting. But whatever it is, what are some things that you like looking forward to? All right, so we're going to put the fries in the bag on personal vision. Let's talk about business vision. So business vision specifically, we talk personal vision. Now, business vision has 3 components to it. Now, what I'm about to hit here is foundational. And you might be thinking, God, this is so slow. Like I was hoping for more like tactical things. Then you're in the wrong session, my friend, because strategy is about broad view. It's about looking at all the individual components. Is it a little boring, a little tedious? Yeah, maybe. I find it exciting because this is the direction that I'm turning the boat. So I might be 3 degrees off and I'm like, oh no, I actually want to be at that destination. I don't want to be over there on the rocks. I want to be over there on the beach. This is really critical. So what we're going to be talking about is some foundational stuff here that's really going to help you drive your strategic plan for your business. So let's talk about the 3 C's of business vision. The 3 C's of business vision are core purpose, core values, and your client avatar. Core purpose, core values, client avatar. We're going to unpack each one of these because it's necessary for the rest of the strategic plan. If you're not clear on these things, it's going to be hard for you to plan. It just is. Whenever I have been hired into a corporation, any sort of company, any small business, and I sit down and I start asking questions around these 3 areas, any business that is weak in any of these 3 areas, it shows up in a lot of different ways. It shows up in poor sales. It shows up in bad profitability, where they're not making money or they're not keeping a lot of money. It shows up in bad company culture. You got a lot of gossip and a lot of office politics and things like that being played out. All this weird stuff and very, very efficient or very fragmented marketing. So all of that stuff shows up because these 3 areas are not clear. So I'm just telling you, this is foundational to effective strategic planning. Let's talk about core purpose. Core purpose is specifically what business are you in and what problems do you specifically solve? Again, as I've gone into other businesses and they say, well, I'm in the real estate business. I'm like, great. What does that mean? You just say that you're in the real estate business, but that could mean a lot of things. Are you a residential realtor? Are you into home inspections? Do you do, are you a property manager? What do you do? Right? Like that doesn't tell me much to say that you're in residential real estate. So, or even just in real estate, you got to be really specific. And sometimes really dialing it in, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the avatar in terms of geographics, demographics, and psychographics. But it's really important that you know what business you're in and be a little obnoxious about it. Be like, nope, that's actually not what I do. And that's actually good because what we're looking for in your marketing and your lead gen, when you're creating a strategic plan is to be a little magnetic. Remember, magnets do what? Magnets, you're saying dreamscaping? Yes, actually, yeah, that's it. I've heard it called that, Christopher. That's a great word. Dreamscaping, um, or whatever you want to call that visioning process. Absolutely. I don't care what you call it. Just do it. Right. I think actually it was called dreamscaping in the 4-Hour Work Week. I think that's the phrase that he used. So thank you for putting that, for bringing that up, Christopher. But again, be really specific about, like kind of, we talked about magnets, right? Magnets are not only they attract, but magnets do what? They repel. So that's not a bad thing. I've had a few people. Now it's kind of interesting. So I can see the number of people on the call tonight. Some people have come in, some people have left, and some people have come back. But the thing is that a lot of people are not here, and that's okay. Maybe they looked me up and said, I can't stand that guy's face. I can't stand his voice. I hate his face. I can't do it. Okay, that's great. Because not everybody is my cup of tea. Or I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and nor are they mine. So the thing is that, but the few who are, that's your tribe. And again, you don't need millions. Set aside your ego and just go, no, I'm really looking for the people who are my tribe. I'm really looking for the people who really want my brand of what I bring to the table. And that's okay, right? You don't have to have millions to do really, really, really well, right? Even just a couple hundred, even just a few dozen, depending on what kind of product or service you do, you can still do really, really well. So I just want to encourage you, really get dialed in on your core purpose. And again, a lot of companies, and I know they wander too much. The roofing company starts putting on gutters, or the guy who does room additions all of a sudden starts building decks, right? Just because he feels like that's, oh yeah, I can make a little bit of money doing that. But unfortunately, you start to get more and more fragmented, and people start to forget what it is that you actually do. All right, so let's talk about core values. Core values is really important, and I know this sounds super squishy and tree huggy and all that stuff, but you have to take the time to really dial in about your company core values. Your company core values are specifically about what matters to you about this business, and how would the world be worse off if you went out of business, if you were no longer doing business. The reason that core values are so important is because it defines company culture. And company culture and company brand are inextricably linked. Think of a company, a local company nearby to you that has a very strong brand. Maybe it's a national chain. Maybe it's just a local company that's like, oh my gosh, I love going to Sal's. They've got the best burgers, right? There's a place on the north side that has these double spanked burgers, and that's what they call them. Like they call it like spank me twice if you want a double, right? It's kind of cute. But the thing is, their burgers are amazing, right? Now their company culture, it's a typical corner bar, literally on the corner, but they make really, really good food. And you go there if you kind of want to lose about 14 minutes off your life, because of the cholesterol, but it's amazing food, right? They have a culture around that. Everybody knows them for that. And there's other businesses around here that have a company culture, not just for great food, but for kind of how they are. There's a guy here locally. He's a massive raging Cubs fan, and everything around his bar is all around Cubs regalia and all that stuff, right? I don't really care much for baseball, or really, I don't get all that dialed into sports these days. But the thing is, that's his thing. Everybody in town knows that when opening day for baseball is, that's where everybody's going to be, right? So he's got a company culture built around that. So what would your company culture be? Something around that. What are the relics? What are the stories that get told are based around your company culture? And that is really critical, especially if you're trying to build a business that's going to be sold, because people will pay a lot more for a company that has a strong company culture. It's just the way it goes. All right, so we talked about core purpose, we talked about core values. Now let's talk about your client avatar, and this is who you're doing it all for, right? This is who you're showing up for every day, and this is you want to think of who specifically and ideally do you want to serve. Think about who that is, and think about them in terms of their geographics, their demographics, and their psychographics. The geographics is pretty straightforward. It's where they are. The demographics is who they are. Are they married? Are they wealthy? Are they young, poor, whatever, young or old, rich or poor, that sort of thing. And finally, their psychographics is how they think and how they buy. How do they make buying decisions? And when you think about psychographics, I want you to think of the term ALIA, A-L-I-A, and that is their attitudes, their lifestyles, their interests, and their aspirations and goals. Now, since we're talking about strategic planning, if you have not done any of this exercise related to core purpose, core values, or client avatar, you've got plenty of homework to do. All right. If you're going to do anything tonight, and if you're weak on any of these areas, truly, if you're going to say, okay, 1 to 10, where do you think you're at from, Christopher, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I'm also reading Tim Ferriss. Oh, okay. Oh, Rich Dad, Poor Dad wrote up Dreamscaping? I wasn't familiar with that. I'm not. I read that book literally a zillion years ago, but Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, I've read more recently. But Vanity, you're saying freedom and more time with my children. Vanity, that's great. I would say that's a great start, right? So I would say like freedom to do what, or freedom from what? Because I also hear a lot of people will say that they want financial freedom, and then I say, okay, what does that mean? And then they usually give me a very vague answer of like, well, I want to do whatever it is I want to do whenever I want to do it. Okay, what does that mean? What's that like? And usually they have a real tough time answering what that said. And I'm like, okay, do you want to do naked skydiving holding a baby shark? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, so we can take that one off the list. Right now, I know I'm being a little snarky, but I'm not doing that on purpose. It's important that you know what that is, because if all of a sudden you wake up one day and you've arrived at the promised land, you're like, wow, I actually have enough money to do what I want to do, and now you're like, well, wow, we never really planned for this. This is why it's good to do this now, so you don't wake up one day, or worse, you wake up with a partner and you're sitting next to a stranger and you have spent the last 20 years growing apart, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know this person. All right. I've heard a lot of that happens sometimes as well. Okay. Okay. LOL. All right. So, the naked shark thing. Yeah, I get it. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of like from 1 to 10, how well are you defined from 1 to 10, 1 being very low, 10 being very high, extremely high. How do you rate yourself in each one of those 3 areas from core purpose, core values, and client avatar? If it's anything less, if it's anything a 7 or less, you've got work to do. And I'm telling you, I know that sounds like a little harsh, but if it's a 7 or less, you've got some real work to do. If you're an 8 or better, I think you're fine. But I'm probably, I'm going to say 9.5 pretty much across the board right now, only because I'm on a little bit of transition because it's the end of the year, but that's all part of strategic planning. Heading into the year, I'm going to be a solid 10 across the board. I'm going to know everything. I'm going to know exactly what my core purpose is, what my core values are, and my my client avatar. All right, so let's get to the 3 C's of business vision. We'll be wrapping this up. Core purpose, core values, and client avatar. That is the 3 C's of business vision. I have a lot of work to do. Hey, listen, Josie, you're making a great first step by being here. So take the time, make sure you're budgeting time. This is not going to be something you're going to bang out in a weekend. It's going to take time, but I promise you, keep at it. Keep these things in front of you. Make little note cards, put them in front of you, and make sure you're continually revisiting these things over and over and over. And this is just part of the work that will get you to where you want to go. All right, so we talked about vision. Now let's talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is the bones of the business. It's the things that are the non-sexy stuff, right? The desks, the chairs, the computer systems, the software, websites, things like that. And you might be thinking, well, why doesn't infrastructure come first if it seems like it's so important? The reason why is, let's say that, for argument's sake, that, Josie is let's say part of her, vision is to lay on the beach in Spain, rubbing cocoa butter on her belly, right? That's great. But the thing is, if she designs an infrastructure that's going to require her to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, that's going to be a horrible experience if she's trying to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year rubbing cocoa butter on her belly, right? So again, all roads lead back to that personal vision. So you want to build an infrastructure that's in alignment with that vision. So this is why I'm saying, like, again, this is why vision comes first after the infrastructure. Or I'm sorry, the infrastructure comes after the vision. All right, so that is vision, that's infrastructure. Next is process. So process is simply how you do stuff. And there's 2 components to process. There is tactical process and there is strategic process. Let's look at first tactical. Tactical is just the day-to-day stuff. It's all the stuff that Michael Gerber wrote about in the E-Myth, like just How do you do stuff from a day-to-day perspective, right? Your standard operating procedures to ensure that you're doing things consistently, like your checklist items, your day-to-day activities, your opening procedures, your closing procedures, how you answer the phone, how you prepare bank deposits, all that boring stuff that no one ever wants to take time to do, right? That's the tactical stuff that you do. You don't really spend a lot of time with that in strategic planning generally. That's probably more of a more tactical sort of thing that you do. But I'm not suggesting that it's not something that you should avoid either. If you know you're weak in a specific area, that you don't have processes really dialed in and you're not consistent, then that's a dead giveaway that you have weak processes or just processes that are not documented. So it's really important that you take that time to, in your strategic planning, to at least identify the areas that do need to be more dialed in, a little bit more consistent. And when it comes along the process, that's what you got to do, right? Is people have to know their jobs. So when you're looking at this, if I drew a box around infrastructure and process, specifically infrastructure and the tactical part of process, that's the system. That's your business system. And that's important to recognize because, when you have a vision and a system, once those two things are defined, that's when you can create a strategy. That's the important part, is the infrastructure and the tactical part of process. That's when you can start to create a strategy. If you don't have those things dialed in, right, specifically and framed specifically around a business vision, around core purpose, core values, and client avatar, because you're not going to build an infrastructure unless you have those things figured out, hopefully. So once all this stuff is figured out, now you can start creating a strategy. And the part of the strategy, the other side of process, is strategic planning. So let's talk a little bit about strategic planning. Now we're going to get into the weeds a little bit here, and I'm going to throw at you some larger concepts. You may need to look some of this stuff up afterwards. I'm going to do my very best not to overload you with too much like master's degree stuff, right? I don't have a master's. I just have an undergraduate in accounting. Although I am in a PhD program right now, you can go straight to PhD with organizational psychology. So that's what I'm doing right now. Why? I have no idea. I feel like I just needed to bang my head against the ground. But anyway, the strategic planning stuff, this is stuff where you can start to think about three main components. This is around people, purpose, and promotion. People, purpose, and promotion. I'm going to be bringing people back up at the end, but understanding that you may need different people than what you have right now in your organization, even if you're just an organization of one. And this is where you say, well, I'm just a solopreneur and I want to keep it that way. I'm telling you, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to grow. You're going to struggle to scale. I will argue that it's going to be pretty much impossible to scale, but you can grow. Growing and scaling are not the same thing. Scaling is more exponential. Growth is more linear. So I'm saying you do need other people in your organization. As I was growing Strategic Boardroom, and in 2025, I made the concerted effort to really lean in to start growing it. I brought other people in to help me do things that I could not do. And it's mostly administrative stuff, just because I'm a horrifically bad at admin work. I'm just not good at it. So I have people who check my email inboxes, make sure that I'm responding back to the things that I need to respond back to, and do all the things. And sometimes, oh, hey, someone called up and they didn't get a bill paid or something. They need a credit card. Okay, cool. Can you take care of that for me? Right. This is the sort of stuff that they do, and people to handle other functions within the 4 core functions of business. The 4 core functions of business are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. I'm going to hit that again here in a little bit, so don't freak out if you didn't hear that. But I'm just saying, like, you're going to need other people in your organization, and it may not necessarily be people you hire. It could be vendors. It could be other people who are that are subcontractors, or people that just be able to maybe do something that you're not great at. Okay, that's fine. So you've got people externally, and you also have to start recognizing the people internally that you're going to need help with. So the people external, it might be your customers, might be your client base, might be people that you're trying to reach. So these are all the people that you need to start considering in your strategic plan, especially if you're trying to gain market share in a specific field. Next, you have to think of the purpose. The purpose of the strategic plan is, it has to be in alignment with your core purpose. If your strategic purpose is like so far out there and so far away from your core purpose, it's going to be weird. It's going to be weird to everybody around you. There's It's like it would be like if Starbucks started selling chainsaws. It would be bizarre, right? Like, why are you selling chainsaws? Well, you can, right? So, well, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And because it's going to get very, very confusing to all the people involved in your organization. I'll give you, I'm going to go on a quick sidebar here, but there was a guy, and I'm going to change his name, but there was someone that I once knew, and he had a very, very strong brand. And we'll just say his name was like Real Estate Ralphie. Okay. Not his real name, but Real Estate Ralphie. And everyone knew him by that moniker. And he owned the color yellow, like that was his color. So anytime you saw Real Estate Ralphie come on and you saw the color yellow, you just knew it was going to be something about real estate, right? Well, that was his brand. Like, he had spent a lot of time working on that brand. Well, it's interesting. One day, Real Estate Ralphie jumps on a live video, or it was a Facebook live, and Real Estate Ralphie is pitching some sort of mushroom coffee for like $15. And I was like, what are you doing? What in God's name are you doing? Because he had spent I'm talking years building that other brand around Real Estate Ralphie. And all of a sudden, now you're selling like $15 bags of coffee. What are you not doing the real estate thing anymore? Like, what are you doing? And I can tell you at that point in time was the beginning of the end for the Real Estate Ralphie side of things with him. And that was kind of heartbreaking. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? And I didn't really know him well enough to say anything, but that's how you can demolish a brand. And again, entrepreneurs, I'm telling you, entrepreneurs, they get that shiny object syndrome. We're going to talk about something near the end called the Dunning-Kruger effect. But it's really when you get to the end and you get to when you get low and you're not seeing the results that you want to see, it's easy to get that shiny object syndrome and just start wandering and to go, man, should I lean into this more or should I go do something different? So I'm just saying, this is why your strategic purpose has to align with your core purpose. Why not? It is considered a venturing into in new areas. The reason for that is because it's distracting for the avatar. If he truly was doing like going to blow up the real estate thing and go into this mushroom coffee, fine. But it was another thing that he was doing. And here's the problem: is how much do you think I could trust Real Estate Ralphie now with my real estate stuff? Because now, like, okay, you're selling this coffee. It becomes very confusing. It becomes very fragmenting for your target audience. Because, like, oh, are you showing me up to sell me coffee or Mary Kay, or are you here to sell me insurance? I'm not saying, look, if you wanted to sell coffee, then sell the coffee. Get that thing up and running. Get it generating 20 grand a month. Turn it over to one of his kids or wherever else it is, and then create another business, right? That's the problem that I see, is that entrepreneurs end up chasing too many rabbits and they end up catching none. So I'm just saying, this is what I've seen this over and over and over and over, and where business owners are trying to build too many bridges all at one time, and they run over to one bridge and work on that a little bit, and they run over this other bridge and work on this other bridge. Meanwhile, the third bridge is starting to fall down a little bit, so they run over there, right? Build one bridge, use that knowledge that you gained from building that bridge, walk back over and build your next bridge. That's the best analogy that I can use for something like that. So Phil says, I work in insurance. Very good. I'm glad to have you here. Or new businesses. Okay. So yeah. So if it's a new business, what I would say is get that thing up and running, put all of your attention into that one thing, get that thing up and running, and get it automated, or turn it over to someone else. That's exactly what I've done in my rental property business, and that's exactly what I've done in my property management business. I don't really have a job. That's why I was able to write. I've written 8 books. I've written, I'm able to do stuff like this without my phone blowing up. Okay. So this is important to think about that. And again, I did all this stuff wrong too. I did back in 2008, I was doing all sorts of goofy stuff, day trading and house flipping and running around trying to do rentals, and I was still doing some segmented work around accounting because my background's in accounting. It was just crazy. I wasn't effective at any of it. I was doing none of it very well. So that's what I would encourage you. Focus on one area, get making money in that one area, put all of your chips in that. And again, I'm just saying, lean in and find a way to make that work. That's the way that the thing that I suggest. So the last part of this is promotion. The promotion piece is really, really critical because it's not only externally promoting the strategic plan, right? The purpose of what your plan is. Maybe it's to gain market share. Maybe it's to launch a new product or service, within your business, right? Whatever that is, maybe you're a roofer and you want to launch you've got a new strategic alliance with a new brand of shingle, right? That's really important. So that could be part of that strategic purpose, or you're expanding your market share by going into another town that's next over because you're already at 80% market share in your current market, right? That could be a part of the strategic purpose. But the promotion piece is really important because it's not just letting your outside vendors know, your suppliers know, and obviously your new customers know, but you've got to make sure you're promoting that also to the people inside your organization so that everyone knows what the plan is. And you got to repeat yourself a lot. So the one thing that I want to talk about, and this is really important here, is that if you've never seen this before, this is called the unattainable triangle. And this is where most businesses really struggle. And most entrepreneurs struggle with this, especially upfront. They will try to compete on 2 or 3 of these, and they don't end up doing it well. So this unattainable triangle is the idea that you can compete on price, you can compete on quality, or you can compete on speed. If you're in a service-related industry, then you can swap the word speed for service, okay? So you're either going to compete on price, quality of your products, or speed or service, right? One of the two. If it's speed, it's manufacturing. So this is where a lot of businesses rise and fall, is when they try to compete in all 3 of these areas. You cannot have something at the lowest price, at the best quality, at the fastest speed, or at the highest level of service. It just won't work. Now, I could make an argument that you could probably do 2 of the 3, but generally the ones that do the best are the ones that compete on just one. And I will tell you, the ones that compete on just one, it better not be price. Because if you're competing on price, you have got to be the lowest price, and you have got to have the efficiencies and the buying power and the buying capacity to match that. Because that's the only way Walmart has made their name, because that's usually what I hear. Well, what about Walmart? They compete on price. They do, but they also they're losing market share. Like there's a lot of fragmentation going on with Walmart right now, and I'm not sure that Walmart's going to be around in our generation. Look at the previous Sears and Roebuck and JCPenney's and Kmart. Kmart was way bigger than Walmart at one point in time. Now it's basically gone. So I'm just saying, you have to, when you're looking at this and when you're trying to compete, you don't want to compete on all 3 of these. You want to find one that you can compete on. And my recommendation is do not compete on price. And here's the thing. I would much rather be everyone's indirect competitor than one person's direct competitor. What do I mean by indirect competition? Indirect competition is, I say this because most people compete directly by offering a little bit more for a little bit less, and a little bit more for a little bit less. And before you know it, everyone in the industry is broke and no one is making money. But an indirect competitor is basically when you have someone you have another option, right? So in other words, what would be an indirect competitor? So what an indirect competitor might be someone, instead of for example, you've got a hotel, right? That's in town, but you have an Airbnb. Now, are you a direct competitor to the hotel? You're not, because you offer a valet service for someone's car. You might offer trash service that's taken out every day, or a cleaning service that's done every other day, right? Or maybe someone comes in and cooks the meals. Now, is that an apples to apples comparison? It is not, because you have differentiated. And that is the main thing that is really important to carve out when you're strategic planning. So let's look at the Porter's 5 forces. Porter's 5 forces, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this. You can look this up yourself. I'm going to get myself out of the way. But basically what this is, this is your master's level education tonight. But this is what happens when there's competition in the market, right? There's threat of new entrants on top, like threat of new people creating new businesses. You've got the threat of substitute products down below. You've got bargaining power of buyers. You've got suppliers on the other side. Like this, there's all these forces that are going on that are just competing with you all the time. And the minute I start competing head to head is when I start wasting resources. And that's why I'm trying to say for that. So any other example for direct versus indirect competitors? Yeah, there's all sorts of examples. So a direct versus indirect is, I'll tell you what, let me talk about differentiation, and then this will probably make more sense. Okay. So this is, we'll get to the other side of differentiation, and then we'll talk about that. Because, for example, like we're going to talk about a cleaning business here in just a minute. So here's where you start thinking, am I competing on price? So when you're competing on price, is like, here's a dead giveaway that you might be competing on price. And I'm just telling you, it's a race to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom. So when you're being strategic, when you're putting together your strategic plan, if you're going to be the lowest priced person out there, you need to make sure that you're always the lowest price, because there's no benefit to being the second lowest price. There just isn't. There's no benefit to being the second lowest price unless you're going to differentiate yourself in other areas. So making price decisions based on what other people are charging. I hear that all the time. And like, especially people who are in the coaching space who reach out to me because they want to be in business coaches, they want to be in life coaches, they want to be, in some sort of coaching. But the thing is, well, I don't know what to charge. What are other people charging for this? And they start pricing based on what other people are charging. Well, great. Now you've created a Me Too product. Don't price based on that. Price based on what value you bring to the table. So what's another example? Offering discounts for low value reasons. Oh, it's Black Friday, so I'm going to offer a sale. What does that have to do with the price of tomatoes? It doesn't have any bearing on why you would do a sale. If you want to promote on Black Friday, by all means, but don't just offer a discount just for the sake of, because it's Black Friday. If you're going to buy 50 widgets, where like each widget might be, if there's a real value in selling you 50 versus 10, because I don't have to, because I can get a break on shipping and I can offer you a discount for volume, that makes sense. But don't make discounts just for the sake of it, because that is a way of competing on price. Making pricing decisions based on what you think you should charge and not based on actual data in the market. This is where you need to make educating decisions, and also often defaulting to cutting price rather than stacking on value. So this is where you start to differentiate yourself. So I just want you to think about how do you avoid competing? So this is where you stack value rather than cut price. So I would rather keep my price the same or increase my price and add more things to it to sweeten the pot. That is not competing on price. That is differentiating. That is adding more value. And that is an absolute win for anyone who wants to differentiate themselves in the market. So how do you avoid competing? Well, don't assume that everybody wants the lowest price. If you assume everybody wants the lowest price, let me ask you something. Do you have a loved one in your family and you found out that they've got a very serious heart condition, and you go, well, let me go shopping around for heart surgeons. Yeah, let me just kind of see what's out there. Probably not. I know I would not. I would find the best one I could max out all my credit cards on, right? So you're not going to, are you going to look for the cheapest heart surgeon? Are you going to look for the fastest heart surgeon? It's like, oh, we're going to do your heart surgery in 30 minutes less or it's free, right? Like no one's going to buy a heart surgeon that way. But you are going to look for the best heart surgeon, right? So another thing is to differentiate yourself with your core purpose, your ideal client avatar, and your core offering. So I'll give you an example. All right. So this might help clear things up for you. Let's say for example, all of us today, Phil, Satya, right? We're, Chosi, we're all going to get into the cleaning business today, right? Right now, before the end of the call, we're all going to get in the cleaning business. Okay. And that our core purpose is that we clean residential houses, and our ideal avatar is anyone who needs a house cleaning. And our offer is that, we're going to come clean your house for $200. Are we differentiated at all? at all? Are we different? Are we any different from the person who's been doing it for 15 years that basically does the same thing? No, we're not differentiated even a little bit. Some of you could split off in the next 15 minutes after we've launched this business and start your own cleaning business, right? Thank you, Vanity. No, yeah, you're going to get this presentation emailed to you, Sadia. So this is what I'm saying. Like, you're not going to be differentiated at all, because there's no barrier to entry. Remember Porter's 5 forces? What's the threat of new entrants? There's no barrier to entry. There's no barrier to entry at all, just like in coaching or just like in many other businesses and industries where there's a very low barrier to entry. So this is where I'm just starting to think. So one of you could split off. Instead of charging $200 for cleaning, you start charging $150 to do the same exact thing. Now it's a race to the bottom. You see? So we're not differentiated. But let's say we get a little creative. And we say, hey, we're going to take the time to understand our avatar. And we realize that it's not just the house cleaning that they have an issue with, but it's getting dinner started and getting the dog walked and arrange to have the dog poop picked up and arrange to have the grass mowed and arrange to have Christmas lights hung in the winter. Now, is that something we might be able to create an offer around? Is it not an offer that we might find a very specific avatar to buy? And are we massively differentiated from someone else who just does house cleaning? Absolutely. And that is something we could charge $1,000 a month or more for, because we're taking care of other things. So this is how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace, right? So that's why I'm saying I would rather be someone's indirect competitor to say, yeah, they kind of do that, right? Where they look at me as another option. That's what I'm saying, is I don't want to go head to head with them on price. I offer so many different services. It's kind of like, well, yeah, but we can hire someone to go pick up your dog poop. Yeah, but my cleaner does that. Like, wait, your cleaner does that? Right? It's because they're highly differentiated, and that necessarily doesn't mean that you do it. Maybe you hire someone else to do it, and you mark that up for basically being a general contractor, right? But this is what I'm saying, is how do you avoid competing? By differentiation. And you just pick, look, what I'm saying is differentiate. If you're going to differentiate yourself on price, then be the highest price, be the highest one, like, and make it something where you can differentiate yourself on other areas of service or speed, or be the fastest or have the highest quality. But competing directly on price makes very little sense, because now you're always going to be struggling. And I know I'm challenging some of you here in this ideology, and you're like, man, this is going to be tough. I fought this for years until finally I stopped banging my head against the ground. I was like, yep, I get it. And you know what? I sold this book. It's $34.95 on Amazon. Okay, so I'm going to cards on the table. I have no reason to make stories up here. Okay, I do have a control over what the price is set on at Amazon, but I don't have any control of what I make, because they determine the cut, right? And I don't make a lot of money on books anyway. So I'm just letting you know that, like, you don't, unless you're selling 1 million of them, you really don't make a lot of money. So what I'm saying is, what's important to me is if someone buys it off Amazon, I don't know who buys it on Amazon. So what I want to do is I want to get them to buy it directly from me. So if I get them to buy it off my website, right? And this is for people who are in the United States. Now I know who buys it, right? And I can offer them a little bit more because I'm making more money, and I can sign the book. They get more value. They get a couple of guides. They might, they get a 30-minute session with me directly. So have I differentiated myself? Listen, I've given them the reasons why I can charge less, right? Because I actually make more money when I do my own shipping, and I've got a stack of books where I can do that. So have I differentiated myself? Yeah, I absolutely have. But the reason is, if they want to go out and I was in the black, meaning I was at profitability within the first week of publishing this book. I did not do that the first couple of books that I wrote. That was a disaster, right? Because I was trying to compete on price. I was trying to sell it for like $8, and it was such a nightmare. I was like, I'm not doing that again. The minute I started premium pricing, because I marketed it very, very different and not competitive at all. I put that out there for a larger price because I knew that the book was really, really good. And it is, not just saying because I'm saying it. I'm saying it because other people have told me that. But I'm saying this because I really put a lot of time and effort into making that a very, very good book. It's not a gimme. Like it's a 300-page book. There's a lot in there. Okay. So I'm just saying I wasn't trying to compete on price. I certainly wasn't trying to pump out a book every other month. But there are smaller guides that I put out there that are, that are all like 30 or 40 pages. Right. So I'm just saying there's different things that I try to compete on, but it's never, I won't say never. It's very, very seldom on price, very seldom on price. So that is about the process. We talked tactical. Now let's talk a little bit. We talked a little bit strategic. Now I'm going to come back to this here in just a few minutes. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly because I know we're getting a little bit lean on time, but a good plan. So this is about the E portion of the Viper methodology. So we talked about vision, infrastructure, process. The execution part is, again, this is one of my favorite quotes from General Patton, is a good plan violently executed now is way better than the perfect plan executed next week. And that is so true. And the reason why I bring this up is because most plans fall apart in execution. And that's because, again, I love you guys, like my fellow business owners, but we kind of suck at having priorities where you have that to-do list that's like 37 items, right? So having too many priorities has the same impact as having no priorities. And this is why I like to come up with a daily 5. You're going to hear me bring this back up again here in just a few minutes. But the daily 5 is up to 5 highly specific actions that you need to take every day. Now, for me, the number's 3, but up to 5 highly specific things that you're going to do that are going to move the needle towards your business vision, your vision, either personal vision or business vision, or your strategic plan. One of the two, right? So just saying your daily 5 activities is not like check email, check voicemail, right? It's not anything like that. It's got to be much more specific than that. Let's see. Could you put up the ideal client avatar slide again? I'm going to come, that's way back. So I'll come back. Actually, I'll tell you what, Phil, that's so far back that would probably have to go back to that, but it'll be, you're going to be getting a copy of this whole presentation emailed to you. Okay. So unfortunately, that's so far back, I would miss that. But the ideal client avatar is, again, where we talked about your ideal person that you're looking for, and like who specifically and ideally do you want to work that you want to serve. And you're going to break them down geographically, demographically, and psychographically. Geographics is where they are, demographics is who they are, and psychographics is how they think and how they buy. And you're going to break that out into the acronym ALEA. The psychographics is attitudes, lifestyles, interests, and aspirations and goals. So hopefully that helps you. I know that was kind of quick, but that's the gist of it. So the reporting function in the Viper framework is around lead metrics and lag metrics. Lead metrics is based on your actions and activities, and that's the stuff that you're going to measure. That's the stuff that you do, right? That's your actions that you do. Your lag metrics are the results of those actions and activities. So do you have any direct control over your lag metrics? No, you don't. I don't have any control of how many people showed up tonight. That's a lag metric. I do have control over how much I marketed this thing, right? But I don't have any control of anything else. I mean, promoting, I can send out emails and stuff like that, but I can only control my activities. So if you're not getting the results you want, you just have to look at your actions and activities and adjust from there. So that is the Viper framework, right? The vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. So let's take a quick look at the psychology side of things, right? Systems are important, but systems are only going to get you so far. So when we're looking at the psychology side of things, in the business psychology, we're looking at both individual and personal psychology and organizational and business psychology. And when you're looking at personal psychology, you're looking at things like self-worth, self-management, limiting beliefs, things like that, right? When you're looking at your business psychology, your organizational psychology, it's external and internal. So there's those main components of business psychology, which are external components and internal components. Can you repeat on reporting again? Reporting is both lead metrics and lag metrics. Lead metrics are based on your actions and activities. Lag metrics are based on the results of those activities. So when you're thinking about personal and individual psychology, I want you to think about something called a presupposition. And this is where it gets into individual psychology, is where are some things that I want you to think of this in advance. What are some things that could prevent you from hitting your goals? I want you to think about that now. because if you're doing strategic planning, it's important to know, well, what are some things that, okay, well, part of my strategic plan, let's say for argument's sake, is to have, I want to have 12% body fat. Okay, well, I'm going to have to make sure that my family knows, like, don't bring chocolate chip cookies home. I need to tell my neighbor not to bring over a 6-pack and a pizza for, on Thursday night football, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? So you need to start to think about these things which could prevent you from hitting your goals, and then enroll those people around you into that vision. That's important. That enrollment piece is really, really critical, because if you don't enroll them, right, or enlist the help of other people, they're not going to know. And they really need to know that what you're doing, like, hey guys, I'm not going to go out and hang out on Friday nights anymore, because I want to get up early Saturday mornings and work on my business, right? I don't want to go out having on a bender every Friday night, because I'm gonna wake up. I'm not going to wake up until noon. It's not going to work for me, right? And that's what I did for years, right? Like, not the drinking part, but the hanging, going to bed early on Friday so I could get up on Saturday while they're still in bed and I'm working on my business. That was important for me. Okay. So from the personal side, again, we're looking at business external. Sorry, that was out of order here. All right. So the business psychology, again, we're looking at external and internal psychology. So from external perspective, we're looking at things like buyers and vendors, and even things like politics. That's really important to consider in the strategic plan, and just the different. There's a lot to unpack there. Unfortunately, I can't get into it now because again, this is scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes. So I just want to make sure that I'm hitting all the things here. But there's a lot of things to consider in the external component of business psychology. Most of the stuff that I would talk about, especially if you're looking to grow, is going to be related to buying psychology. So start thinking about it, like I mentioned earlier, around the client avatar, around geographics, demographics, and psychographics. So let's look at the internal when you're looking at management and leadership. Now, when it comes to leadership, I look at leadership with 3 pillars. Then it comes down to trust, vision, and communication. Now, this is so super critical, because if you are missing any one of these 3, people are not going to want to follow you. They just won't. They may trust you, and you may have a really compelling vision, but if you can't communicate effectively, they're not going to follow you. If they don't trust you, I don't care how good the vision is or how well or how articulate you are, they're not going to follow you. If they don't feel you're competent, or if they don't trust your character, they will not follow you. Now, there's 5 other components to trust, right, around things like caring and commitment and consistency and communication and consistency. But these are all different areas that are really related to trust. And the fastest way to generate trust and create trust with other people is to demonstrate competence. But I'm telling you, your ability to sell and your ability to lead rises and falls with your character. Because let's say I was coming on here and I was like, hey guys, I got to hurry up and get out of here because I got a date with my girlfriend tonight. And some of you are like, didn't he say he was married? Did he mean his what? Right? Like, you'd be like, no, this guy's a creep. I'm not following him. That's what I'm saying. Like, it rises and falls on your character. So if you start to demonstrate, the fastest way to tear down trust is to demonstrate an absence of character. So if you got some work to do there, I'm just saying, people know. So again, the last piece, of course, if you have trust and you have vision, but you're not able to communicate well, or you don't have a shared vision where you've enrolled people in that vision, not just telling people what the vision is going to be. Remember, people are always more likely or more willing to carry a ball that they helped inflate. So if they feel like they've had no input to this vision of your business or whatever that's going on, if you've got employees or if you've got vendors and you've not enrolled them into this vision of where you want to go, they're not going to be all that excited about it. They're not going to be as excited as you are, right? So think about that in the context of both trust, vision, and communication. So why leadership? Does leadership really matter that much? Well, my next book is actually going to be called The Time Wealthy Leader Boss. And it's really around these 2 elements of caring versus candor. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but many people really struggle when they have caring versus candor. They either care too much, which means that people are going to walk all over them, or they have too much candor where they just don't care. They just kind of say the way it is, and people are just going to treat them like a tyrant. And you're never going to get any discretionary effort. It's just going to be, they'll clock in when they're supposed to, and they will leave when they're supposed to. They will not give you any more effort than what they are required to do. And I have been that guy sometimes because I just felt like the people were tyrants. Okay. So you have to have equal complement of both, and that's why leadership really does matter. And when you look at Leader 5 companies, with Jim Collins talked about level 5 leaders. These were companies where he wrote Good to Great, Great by Choice, and he tracked 30 different businesses he tracked 16 different businesses over the course of 30 years. And these companies they were significantly more profitable. They grew much, much faster. They had a strong company culture. You want to know why? Because they had defined company core values. So this is because these companies were led and directed by level 5 leaders. Leadership is a huge component to this, and it's really important in your strategic planning. If you're not much of a leader, I'm a way better leader than a manager. I'm not a horrific manager. I was a horrific manager at one point in time, but I'm a much better leader than a manager. And the leadership is about unity and unification behind a common message. Management is about differences and managing all the different components of conflicts that come up all throughout the day. Now, I'm not a bad manager. I'm just a better leader. But this little graph that I put up here, this shows these 4 companies here, Amgen, Intel, Microsoft, Southwest. You can see the returns over the course of 30 years when compared to the market or compared to the industry. I mean, look at the industry return, compared to the entire industry for the airline industry for Southwest Airlines, 550 times. Are you kidding me? Right? It's currently, I think it's the largest domestic airline in the United States right now, and it's like worth $16 billion, and half of that is cash. By the way, it's amazing. Very, very healthy company. But generally, the companies that are listed on these frequent 100 best places to work list, they're always representing the highest stock returns, and that's because they've got really, really good leadership. So leadership absolutely makes a huge difference, and that's because growth requires and necessitates change, and leadership is what manages that change, and good leadership will do that. So when we're talking about this business approach of systems versus psychology, and we kind of handle both of these, both elements serve the 4 core functions of business. Now I'm just going to go quickly through this. This isn't rocket science, but the 4 core functions of business are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And your customer's journey happens in that order. First lead gen, then sales, and operations, and accounting. So it's really important that you stop and think about this and consider your customer's journey, and know that you might be thinking, okay, maybe am I weak in some of these areas? Am I great in some of these areas? Where am I struggling? But think about this. Are all of these things the same skill set? No, they're not the same skill set. That's why many solopreneurs and many micro business owners struggle, because they're trying to do things that they're not really great at. They're good at it. And that's the problem, is that many business owners are really smart and they have a really good work ethic. But the problem with that is they're really smart and they have a really good work ethic. And they think that every problem that shows up is a problem for them to solve. And it's not. Just because you're smart, just because the problem shows up at your door, does not mean it's a problem for you to solve, right? Because you've got a great work ethic. I know a lot of business owners that'll work 22 straight hours on a problem, and it's a problem that it shouldn't even be theirs. So I want you to think about that. And again, when we talk about that people component, and this is where we start to get into the strategy part, right? So this is where we got into the planning and the process part around the strategic planning. So you might be thinking, hey, I've got all these ideas, but I have no idea where I'm going to find the time to implement them. This is where you start thinking about the people, and you start thinking about these 8 leadership dimensions. Now, again, this is phenomenal. I really like this. I'm not going to go through all 8 of them, but when you're looking at this, for those of you who are familiar with the DISC personality matrix, you look at the top person there. That is the person at the north part, the 12 o'clock. That is a person who's called a pioneering type leader. They have a very strong action bias, and they often take action very quickly, and they're often highly innovative. They can be really persuasive. They've got kind of the ability to persuade people. This is kind of where I'm at, probably more of the energizing type leader, which is one that's more of the 2 o'clock. We'll go into that here in a second, but they're really, really good. But the problem is the conversations are often very one-sided, and they leave their followers unsupported, and they kind of just leave their followers behind. That's a problem. That's a big problem, right? Look at the humble leader who's at the 6 o'clock, and the humble leader, much more intentional. They're very people-pleasing, very reliable. They love routines, right? But they tend to take forever to move on something, right? They're not super innovative, right? They're kind of the polar opposite of pioneering. And they tend to adopt if it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude, which is not great, especially when you're in a market that's changing a lot and changing very rapidly. So that makes, closes them off to new ideas and leaves them very vulnerable to changes in the market, as particularly rapid changes in the market. When you look at the affirming type leader, that's the one who's at 3 o'clock. They are amazing collaborators, and they're warm and they're friendly, and they're really good at building a very supportive environment, which makes them extremely approachable. But guess what? They really don't like conflict, which means that they avoid tough conversations, and they're more relationship oriented than they are results oriented. So they don't tend to see the inefficiencies that might be obvious to other people, right? So this is, they don't want to address those problems because they're somewhat resistant to change. When you look at the polar opposite, the resolute leader, they are strong-willed, they're persistent, and they tend to give others, courage in really tough times. But they also will speak their mind, and then they love to debate and they love to solve problems, and they're highly driven towards personal mastery. But the problem with them is everyone starts at a 1 out of 10 in trust, right? And they're naturally skeptical, and they have a strong opinion about how things should work. And so they're not really this kumbaya, squishy person. So they've got their own set of problems, right? So I'm just going to hit those four, and there's other components here. Basically the other ones are kind of in the middle of the others, but you have to start to think about where you land in the leadership component, and you start to bring in others that can fill in those gaps and that can challenge you as the leader that you are. So when you start thinking about strategic planning when it comes to people, I want you to start thinking who, not how. Who can I bring in to help me with this stuff, not how can I do it? And that, if you take away nothing else from today other than the 3 C's of business vision: core purpose, core values, client avatar, make sure you do those. But start thinking of who you can bring into the organization, not how am I going to do it. And that right there is really going to help elevate you and make your strategic plan far more tangible, far more reachable, far more likely to actually hit something really, truly special. This is the last piece here, and this is about business vision timelines. This is where you put together, now I like to put together a 36-month timeline in year 3. So month 25 to month 36, that's year 3. And I like to look at it in the perspective of, so I look at it from a 36-month timeline and a 12-month timeline. And the reason for that is because outside of 36 months, there are just too many variables. It doesn't mean that I don't want to plan for something that may be beyond 36 months, but I'm not going to call it like a 5-year vision or something like that, right? Because there's just too many variables. I'm just going to say, listen, it's outside my 36 month. I'm going to call that a future, right? Something, but I'm not going to call it like a 20-year plan. That's crazy. There's just, I mean, it's like when you when you run into that guy from high school who's got that 7-year plan. I'm like, dude, you've had this 7-year plan since we graduated and we're 50 now, right? Like, when is the clock going to ever start on this 7-year plan? So I really want you to again, when the 36-month and 12-month timelines. Now, I want you to think of this in terms of revenues, profits, metrics, RPM, revenues, profits, metrics. So what are your revenues going to be in year 3? What are your profits going to be in year 3? And what are the metrics going to be in year 3? Metrics, again, are just the measurables. It could be number of houses sold, number of customers, number of widgets manufactured, whatever. And you're going to do the same thing for your 12-month. Again, RPM, revenues, profits, metrics. What are the sales? What are the profits that you're going to keep, right? Revenues minus expenses is profit. And then what are the metrics for year 12? Now, what I'm going to tell you is I want your 36-month to be really a stretch. I want it to be like a knock the cover off the ball, like, oh my gosh, if I hit this, this would be amazing if I hit my 36-month timeline. The reason for that is because most people vastly overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and vastly underestimate what they can accomplish in 3 years, right? So I don't want you making this 12-month crazy big, like, well, I'll shoot for the moon and I'll still land among the stars. Look, that makes a great meme, but it's not reality. I want your 12-month to be a stretch. Make it 10 to 20% more than what you're doing now, but make your 3-year a true, like, yeah, that's my knock the cover off the ball. That's what I'm really going to be aiming for. And as you get closer, the 36 months starts to get closer, becomes a 24-month, and then it starts, I mean, now you're going to, because if you put stuff too far out, it's like, well, I'm going to have 6-pack abs in 5.5 years. Really, it's going to take you 5.5 years to get six-pack abs. So this is where I'm starting to think, like, I don't want you having these crazy long goals, but I do want you to have 36 month. That's going to be like, hey, I'm going to hit 10 million in sales in 36 months. Like, wow, okay. But in 12 months, I want it to be more reasonable. That's if you're looking to grow. If you're looking to scale is a different question, but you can't scale if you've got a broken business model. So right now, I don't want to get into the difference between growth and scaling, because growth and scaling are two different things. If you are scaling and you have things are already operating well, then that's a different conversation. But I'm just saying, for right now, if you're looking at growth, which should probably more like a 10 to 20% increase for 12 months, and then you're looking at a 300 to 400% increase, or a 500% increase, or a 10x increase by year 3. Okay, in that third year. So again, just keep in mind that profit margins tend to compress the longer the business goes on. So in other words, if you were looking at like a 40% profit margin in year 1, don't plan on a 40% profit margin in year 3, unless you're planning for that, right? Unless you can plan for those profit margins to stay healthy, which you should be. They shouldn't compress too much, right? So you might be looking at a 40% in year 12 and maybe a 36, percent in year 3 or something along those lines. But rarely do they actually get bigger. So unless you plan for that. So this is where you also start to come up with what's called a pro forma balance sheet and income statement. That is a projected balance sheet and a projected income statement. So in other words, what is it going to look like in year 2 or in year 1, and what's it going to look like in year 3? It's beyond the scope of this. In fact, I did the financial literacy for business owners video today. So if you want to go on YouTube, you can find that. But this is all about balance sheet and income statement and what that looks like. It's beyond the scope of this, but again, you can look that up on your own. But again, if you're not really sure what that is, but really it's just about what is the structure of the business in terms of the assets, the liabilities, and the equity. That's your balance sheet, and your revenues, your expenses, and your net profit, and that is your income statement. All right. So I just want you to think about that. Now, the business vision timelines, we're going to pick this back up. We talked about a 36-month timeline. We talked about a 12-month timeline. We talked again, revenues, profits, metrics. Great. Now let's make it more tangible from a day-to-day perspective. Now what we're going to do is we're going to break that 12-month down into 90-day projects. And you break that 90-day project down. So basically, you're going to chunk this down, and you're going to break down your 90-day projects. You're going to have 4 90-day projects for your 12-month business vision. Now, that should be aligned with your 1-year vision, your 12-month vision. And you're going to break that down. You have your 4 projects broken down into monthly goals, weekly goals, and here it comes, your daily 5. Where did you hear your daily 5? Where did we hear that before? We heard that in the execution function, remember? So, went too fast there. We heard that in the execution function. So again, when we go, I'll go back to this so you can look at this. But the 90-day projects, this is where all the actions and activities are. This is it. This is the holy grail. This is how you execute this strategic plan that you just created. So the daily 5, it's those 5 things that you're going to do every day that are going to be the needle moving activities. I'm banging on my desk because this is so important, but I'm kind of crazy about this. But the daily 5 are the very specific, highly actionable, needle moving activities that are going to move the needle toward your strategic plan or your business vision, right? Or your personal vision too, either way, right? But the point is, those are the actions and activities you're going to take every day. And this is how you break it down. Right. So that is all part of the execution piece. And the last piece here is, so we talked about the systems, the psychology, the 4 core functions, the strategic plan. Let's talk about the resources. We're going to land the plane here, but this is a photo of a guy he's robbing a bank right now. Right. This is a photo of this guy back in 1995, and he robbed a bank, and he and his partner in crime had robbed a series of banks in Pittsburgh over the course of several days. And he didn't make any attempt to cover his face. He didn't have a ski mask on, didn't have anything else. Well, of course, they found these guys in a couple of days. And he was shocked that they could actually find him. And they were like, what do you mean? Like, you weren't wearing anything. Of course we're going to find you, right? He's like, yeah, but I was wearing the juice. Well, what he's talking about is they put lemon juice on their faces, convinced that would make them invisible to the cameras. They were convinced of that. And there was 2 researchers, 2 psychologists that were just made of questions. They're like, they can't truly think that that's true. So this actually spawned a whole thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So I'm going to take myself down so you can see this graph here. The Dunning-Kruger effect it basically it kind of is representative of how many people start out on any endeavor. And it starts there at the bottom. So if you look at the bottom axis of competence, this is basically what you know, and you've got your confidence axis on the left, right? The vertical axis. Well, many people start off and they get very highly confident very, very early, right? They start off there at the bottom and they get very confident very early, and they don't have a lot of competence, but they got a lot of confidence, and they get to the peak of Mount Stupid. Okay. And what happens here is they start to crest Mount Stupid. This is where they start to realize that they don't know what they don't know. Oh my gosh, this is going to be way harder than I thought. And it comes crashing down. Their confidence takes a major hit, and they've learned a little bit, right? They've learned some. They're more competent, but really they've lost their all their confidence. And now here they are in the valley of despair. This is where many entrepreneurs get stuck, and they start going, oh wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. Let me look around. Let me go find something else to do, because this is very difficult. And this is where the shiny object syndrome comes in, because they realize that this thing is a lot harder than they thought. And then of course what happens, they start back here at the bottom, right, where they're basically starting all over again. So if they keep on, though, if they stay with it, if they increase their competence, right, and they start up the slope of enlightenment, eventually they're going to get to that plateau of sustainability. And that is really, really critical for your growth as an entrepreneur. So I really appreciate this study with Dunning-Kruger. And this is where I want to offer you guys something. There's no cost to any of this, but it's important that you guys have a support system. So what I have a community on School. If you'd like to join me, I'm going to put the link in the chat. And what that will do is, you guys, there's no cost to it. There is a cost if you want the premium stuff. But if you just want to be involved in the community, it doesn't cost you anything. You can click on that and just say hello, and we can stay connected. And I am more than happy to answer any questions from you from time to time. And but again, this is the best way that I think that I can help you, and we can stay in touch if you've got questions in the future around your business. So that is everything that I have, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around. Sorry I went a little bit long, but there's a lot of good information in here. I'll have to trim it up a little bit so I can keep it shorter. But thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I hope you did find this helpful, and hopefully this is going to be helpful for you as you head into 2026. There's a lot of stuff in here. You know what you need to do. Don't get hung up in Dunning-Kruger. Make sure you're doing the things that you absolutely need to do. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day.